Okay, so now that we've set up a very basic backend for our full stack application, we're going to head back to our front end here and start implementing these components and seeing how to make them interact with the backend. So first of all, let's just implement some of these components. We're going to implement our to-do list item, to-do list, and new to-do form. And here's what those are going to look like. So for our to-do list item, what we're going to do is say export const to-do list item equals. And this component is going to take three main props. One is going to be a to-do prop. The second one is going to be an on-click complete prop. So this is going to be a function that's called whenever the user clicks the mark as completed button on one of the to-do list items. And the last item is going to be on-click delete, which will be a function prop that will be called when the user clicks delete on one of our to-do list items. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is inside here, it's going to be a pretty simple component. It's not going to contain much logic besides the JSX. What we're going to do is say div. Inside there, we're going to have an h3 heading that will be the actual text of the to-do item. So before we get to that, let's just talk very briefly about what these to-do items are going to look like. Basically, the to-dos, which we're going to eventually be loading from the server, are just going to be JSON objects that contain a few key properties. So the first property is going to be a text property, which will be the actual text of the to-do, right? I don't know, sleep, for example. And they're also going to contain an isCompleted property, which will be a Boolean, just specifying whether or not that to-do has been completed. So it'll either be true or false, essentially. And that's pretty much all we're going to need for now. So getting back to our JSX, the way that we're going to display the text of the to-do is just by inserting the to-do's text into our JSX here. So we'll say to-do.text. Under that, we're going to check if the to-do is completed and basically use that to display a complete message if it is completed. The way we're going to do that is by saying to-do.isCompleted, and, right, this is how we make sure that the thing comes after it is only displayed if the thing that comes before the double ampersand is true. All right, so if the to-do is completed, we're just going to display a paragraph tag that says complete. Okay, and underneath that, we're going to display our buttons. Now, our buttons are going to look like this. We're just going to have two of them. One is going to be our mark as complete button, and when this is clicked, it's going to call the on-click complete prop that we specified up there. So we'll say on-click complete. And the button will say mark as completed. And underneath here, we'll have our delete button, which will say on click equals on click delete. And this one will just say delete. Okay, so that's what our to-do list items are going to look like. Let's move up to our to-do list now. Here's what this component's going to look like. We're going to start off by importing the to-do list item, since we'll obviously be wanting to display that inside this component. And then we'll create our component by saying export const to-do list equals, and this component is going to take three props as well. They're going to correspond to the three props that we saw in our to-do list item. So the first one is going to be to-dos. Now this is going to be the array of all the to-dos we want to display inside the list, whereas, the to-do prop inside our to-do list item was just an individual to-do. We're also going to have an on-complete to-do and an on-delete to-do prop, and these are going to be the functions that correspond to the on-click complete and on-click delete functions that we're passing into our to-do list item. You'll see how that fits together in just a minute if you can't already guess. And inside this component now, what we're going to do is say return. We're going to wrap all of our to-dos inside a div, and inside here, we're going to basically map each of our to-do objects to a to-do list item component. So what that's going to look like, we're going to say to-dos.map, and for each to-do, what we're going to do is return a to-do list item with the to-do passed into the to-do prop. And for onClick complete, we're going to pass in onComplete to-do. And for onClick delete, we're going to pass in onDelete to-do. Okay, so pretty straightforward. That's really all we need to do inside our to-do list. One thing that we are missing, however, is a way of identifying which to-do was marked as complete or which to-do was deleted, right? Inside our to-do list item, we're just kind of blindly calling these functions whenever the corresponding button is clicked. And in to-do list, we're not really helping the matter any. So the way that we're going to do this, right? I mentioned that each of our to-dos was going to have a text property and an isCompleted property. And additionally, we're also going to add an ID property, which is just going to be a unique identifier that we can use to refer to each of our to-dos. Right? This makes things like referring to a specific item in a list a lot easier if we have that ID property. So what we're going to do is we're just going to assume for now that each of our to-dos has that ID property. And you'll see how this all fits together once we actually start working with the server. But assuming that each to-do has an ID, what we're going to do is change the onClick method of both our delete and mark as completed buttons to onClick delete to-do.id and onClick complete to-do.id. Okay, so that'll help us refer to each of our to-dos in our to-do list. And the last thing we have to do is we have to set a key when we use todos.map, right? That's just something that React wants us to do whenever we display lists. It helps with re-rendering. So for that, we're going to use the to-dos ID as well. So we'll say to-do.id for the key. All right, and that is our to-do list. So the last component we're going to implement here is our new to-do form. This one's going to be pretty straightforward as well. We're going to say export const new to-do form. And since this one is going to have a form element in it, right, a text input, we are going to want to import the use state hook from React. And down here, we're going to give this a prop called onClickCreate, right? That'll basically allow our app component, or whatever the new to-do form's parent component is, to know when the user has clicked on that create button after entering something. So what we're going to do, we're going to start off by creating our state variable, which will keep track of the state inside our text input. So we'll say const input value and set input value equals use state. And the initial value of that's going to be an empty string. And then underneath this, we're going to define the DOM structure of our new to-do form. And that's going to look like this. We're just going to say div, and we're going to have an input here, which will be of type equals text. The value is going to be input value. And for onChange, what we're going to do is say event, and we're going to call set input value whenever it changes with e.target.value. That just keeps the value of our input in sync with the value of this state variable as the user types. We might also want to put a placeholder in here, so we'll say something like placeholder equals, I don't know, enter a new to-do, something like that, and that's our input. So additionally, we're also going to want to have a button that the user can click to create a new to-do with that input text that they just typed in. So what this is going to look like, we're going to say button, and for the onClick method, what that's going to look like, we're going to call onClickCreate with the input value. So whatever parent component is passing this prop in to new to-do form, it'll be able to know when the button was clicked and what the text was for the new to-do. Okay? So we're going to call that now with the input value. And we're also going to set the input value back to an empty string. Okay? That's just kind of a basic user interface thing. Okay, so this button now is going to say create, and that's our new to-do form. So we now have all three components implemented for our to-do list application. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.